Now, aberrations from that described stages of that relationship that is lawful, otherwise that is social hazard, are described in detail in this video. Who is the author? I am. There is absolutely nobody else because the majority cannot distinguish pain from pleasure. That's one thing. And secondly, cannot absolutely in no circumstances uh, admit to love or giving priority to a person to decide who that person is in love with. And that is the problem in all of that medicine. And good luck to you because I do not want any licenses until that is fixed. Then that is also dangerous to say because of animals. Those persons that are there run around to castrate and mimic pregnancy to enable work to deserve wedding vows, which is a fiction. That is not a digression. Those are aberrations of relationships that are based on in the capacity of the society to integrate sexual desire into sciences and in all of the other world, also in religion especially. I would like to first admit that that topic has been far too long and not addressed, and that is a problem. That aberration, for instance, is the sexual surrender caused by police officers, often presented in television or in documentaries or news, that is forcing someone to the ground. That is not sexual surrender done to victims or women. Neither it is in videos to cause a person weakness, for instance, without pleasure. That person needs to be by goodness driven to a state in which the other one is so good, in fact, that is loved. That is goodness that causes that state, and there is nothing sexual about being bad or violent. That is a common mistake, and that is absolutely not warranted to give licenses to marriages like that. Or in medicine, that is not basis to suspect when a person arrives like that that it is not alike harassment or rape, even if that person volunteers or declares that it is okay to continue. Now, the aberrations are also in medicine, for instance, in sexual surrender, second, apart from violence, where masculinity is pushed a person forcefully to the ground to have the other one helpless and gloat. Usually it is done in jealousy, primal jealousy about a known person, and in conviction that this is the best of desire from a female that man can obtain, not knowing what being loved is. And that is what that well videos videos also are about. That needs to be reciprocal. The other way around, it needs to be the same, meaning not only the person that is the stronger one who pursues is a source of love, meaning being loved is not sole source of being in love with that person, because that leads to loving that person as long as that person is good, praying for instance reputation or some sort of opinions of others. When is a person a cheater? When that other person does not want to have sex and rejects being in love of that person, and such manifestation even as second best at any time. That a person means keeps that marriage under an impression that the other needs to strive to be desired, which is false, because that is a physical state to have a sexual act that is in relation into one another to happen, obvious. And once realized, it is obvious. The person who is then searching non-stop an excuse to keep that marriage and in theory consult or fix it, but in fact it is to present it as a source of reputation and income, and have that person working or doing something else and doing the same, especially to deserve money and to deserve respect, and impeded often by society, ages and becomes often incompetent to act properly. Dementias are inability to stay in the same room with the person who is desired less than someone. And blanking out also is a result of having that person in physical room in an inevitable way, dismissing the source of information about being desired uh, such person, and doing so in conjunction with others to run then after caregiving, which is what love is not. And that person then mistakes names or sits there because that person actually has a specific person that the person fantasizes about of opposite gender, and that person is absent, and to not to upset that spouse in fears of being harmful in some way or socially ostracized. Mental health dementia usually or neurological label is forced across, and that person from mind to body differs, blanking out to not to participate in unwanted activities because that other person is not desired. And that is why that happens. And for that, then giving medication and rationalizing the cognitive intellectual activity is okay when there is no loved person, because otherwise all of us, and that is the scope of it, we prefer to have sex with someone who is loved. We prefer so, both prefer to do so, unless there is a life a risk of harm or dying for the two, or the two are needed somewhere else because them included others can be harmed. That is the reason to not to have sex, but otherwise that is not a reason. And that sex cannot be that the spouse then leaves and that the other wonders if there's someone else. If there's someone else and there's need for vigilance, the sex is banned. Meaning there is a maximum of that sexual activity from person to person that becomes not possible to overcome, where those persons, for instance, don't want one another child, one or the other, and that is an instinct. So those persons can separate or settle. Settling is fine. Gay relationships are an example of settling. There's nothing here sick or genetic in gay relationships. In gay relationships, persons settle because the two of those persons do not have either an idea of that number five reciprocity of the relationship, which takes that three components in reciprocity that I denominated hexa method do have a relationship, and that is because men fail and cause pain in disbelief, always presenting another to cause these females feeling that they are non-stop pursued and discriminated against, accused of sexual intentions, skipped over in such denials or declarations, to have the others make money on them, usually to impede their own relationships, and having such less wanted causes sickness and infertility. There is nothing we can do about persons who do not pursue most wanted. Those persons will get sick. What does that mean that those persons will get sick? It means that a person who is married to a person who they do not want to have sex with will have an issue having that person around, and so will result to saying, I do not remember that person's name, I call Maria, for instance, Jenny, because I would prefer to be married to Jenny, and Jenny, be it knowing or not, is irrelevant either she lies about it or not. What is irrelevant is the source of arousal and love of that person. If that person feels that way, that person has a chance in mind. In physical body, that sex was good, whereas in mind it is not, chances are that this is the opposite, meaning that person actually is fantasizing about someone or something else, and that is then not an obstacle to a relationship, but that relationship never existed. Meaning that relationship cannot exist because it never existed, and it was ignored and non-pursued, or cause of suffering because of rejection, so non-reciprocity, and that relationship ended and settled at that. And that is then progression toward moving forward, and we do not ever overcome relationships, sexual relationship maturing in the other direction, meaning there is absolutely zero envy if you meet someone who is divorced, because the new person having similar characteristics is not that person's similarly looking, behaving or associated with goodness, look alike person, because that person, the new one, is chosen to be to become loved more, meaning that person is chosen and is possible to pursue because that person did not harm, did not reject, and has what is good being cause of that profiling to pursue that person, and what is being bad or not loved is anew associated with some goodness, which is overcoming in a broader sense in many persons trauma associated with same characteristic from one person which was associated with harm. Now that is how we resolve relationships, meaning if that's an example, if a person who has blonde hair was a person who I had as my first boyfriend, then the next person who has blonde hair is the one who I prefer to the first one, because the first one, the relationship one or the other in a number of rejections, in proximity to having children, was rejected as not wanted. So the source, the individual physical source and intellectual one, was not wanted for a mother and or a father, because someone else or something else was preferred. And that is how the new person, whatever was good about looking or being that person, that new person is source of love. But that person, if changed, that unique individual to another one, that same one is source of sadness or missing, and in person, the other person having those similarities causes nostalgia to go back to seek the new person, not the old one, the loved one. And that is often a source of misunderstandings, because persons then do vendettas and harm marks of desire in persons, and that is absolutely unnecessary. We then now can talk about why it is that persons do not live in the present, because persons settle on what others think is possible, basing on distorted knowledge, and that is actually a regression therapy, meaning remembering all to being able to make in life an order in a relationship. There is a relationship order, and overcoming, meaning having the prior experiences source of a common profile of at first unknown person that is associated with goodness. And if it is a new characteristic, new looks, then a new discovered goodness of person who looks alike, to have children who are loved because of that loved father, and that father being trusted with, or mother, because it works for man and female. I'm speaking on behalf of a female because I am one, and that is the exact same expected for men and from men. There is absolutely no difference. We differentiate and then we run into trouble. Now that is also true for the part about the sexual surrender. I described only a feminine sexual pursuit or display of femininity in goodness, to the male sexual surrender in manifested in weakness and all those symptoms. Adding that pleasure scale, if that is the person is numb, indifferent, or in distress, in pain, then that is a disease, meaning the person reports to us suffering and asks to have it alleviated. So even though that etiology is, for instance, the same as sexual surrender, the moment there is suffering and that cannot be alleviated with anyone else but the person who that person prefers, but for instance denies such a relationship, or prefers, the person is not able to associate or immature the two, whatever the source is, there's no replacement. So that is why we provide advice and treatments, but we explain also etiology from mind to body of such state. Not always it is sex, it can be work, but work is sublimation, meaning having in many cases first of all well-being of own spouse and family in mind. At the beginning in childhood it is mother or father, and limit those are parents. When maturity is achieved and first love appears, meaning being infatuated above school or an activity, that becomes the opposite then. That person's well-being is above, or even sexual activity if possible is above those activities. and that is depending on intellectual level later.